In 2000, director Ridley Scott released Gladiator, a gripping sword and sandal epic that became the second highest-grossing film of the year and won the Oscar for Best Picture and Best Actor. Best Actor went to Russell Crowe, who played Maximus, the Roman general, sworn to avenge his wife and son after they were murdered, while he himself was sold into slavery. When a film is as successful as Gladiator, studio executives naturally start thinking about a sequel. But there was one problem. Gladiator ended with Maximus dying after defeating the villainous Emperor Commodus. Despite this, a sequel was in demand, and for decades Scott tried to make it happen. Now, 24 years after Gladiator, Scott has released Gladiator 2, a film that at first looks almost like a remake of the original, until it stops being one. Scott and screenwriter David Scarpa hit the familiar beats, repeating much of the original's main plot. That becomes somewhat of a problem, because wow, the familiar part of the film is engaging enough. The changes in the third act are far more interesting. Scott and Scarpa would have done better to skip the first two acts entirely and build the whole movie around the final one. Even so, Gladiator 2 is a solid, well-crafted blockbuster and further proof that even at 86, Ridley Scott remains one of the greats, a skilled director who knows how to make a good movie. Gladiator 2. The events of Gladiator 2 take place 16 years after the original and almost exactly repeat the first film's story. A man loses a loved one, is enslaved, seeks vengeance against Rome, and rises to fame as a gladiator. This man is Lucius, who was just a child in the first film. Here, he's played by Paul Mescal, who does a fine job in the role, though the character isn't written all that strongly. It would be wrong to underestimate Denzel Washington. He's the perfect box office actor, a versatile Oscar winner, and one of the finest living performers. It's always a pleasure to watch him work, and in Gladiator 2 he's clearly having fun. That's both good and bad. Washington is so compelling that the movie drags whenever he's not on screen. At first, his character Macrinus seems little more than a secondary figure, a modernized version of the mentor, once played by the late Oliver Reed. But Macrinus dreams bigger. He's always scheming, always plotting, and eventually, his true motives come to light. Despite being overloaded with plot, Gladiator I's biggest strength is its massive, brutal, gladiatorial battles. The action isn't quite as awe-inspiring as in the original, but Scott makes sure each set piece is bigger and wilder than the last. Lucius not only fights other gladiators, but also faces bloodthirsty animals. He battles baboons or rhinoceros, and in one of the film's most spectacular sequences, the Colosseum is flooded to stage a mock naval battle, complete with sharks circling in the water. Of course, historical accuracy is of little concern to Scott and his team. Some characters are based on real figures, but Scott has often said when making historical films, he doesn't get hung up on details. Scott isn't the kind of director trying to give us a history lesson. The first Gladiator may have won Oscars, but it was never really a prestige film. It was a blood-soaked action epic that struck a chord with mass audiences. Will Gladiator 2 win Oscars? It's hard to imagine the sequel making the same impact. Beyond the performances, nearly everything else in Gladiator 2 looks stylish and fitting. The lavish set design is top-notch. John Mathiesen's cinematography, making heavy use of natural light, is beautiful and painterly, and Harry Gregson Williams' score respectfully echoes Hans Zimmer's work from the first film. The soundtrack combines classical, orchestral themes with modern rhythms, creating a tense, dramatic atmosphere. The music conveys Lucius' furious rage, his quest for justice, and the merciless brutality of the Roman world. It captures the ferocity of the arena, the madness of the crowd, and the depth of the hero's emotions, harmonizing with the film's dramatic themes. The overuse of CGI, however, makes parts of Gladiator to look less convincing and sometimes unintentionally comical. The animals and fight sequences often feel too digital, breaking the historical immersion. For instance, the ships, baboons, and sharks at times look like something out of a decade-old video game. The Colosseum, however, feels more authentic. It's not only CGI, but also a full-scale set built in Malta. Still, it's hard to shake the feeling that the sequel spends too much time recreating moments from the original. It's unfair to judge the film for what it could have been, rather than what it is. But Gladiator 2 might have been truly special if more focus had been placed on the third act. Even so, the film does its job. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, nor does it need to. Scott isn't aiming to create an untouchable masterpiece. He's content with delivering an old-school, blood-soaked spectacle. Take away the twists in the final act, and Gladiator 2 is ultimately a pretty straightforward film, and perhaps that's its greatest strength. Scott once again pulls us for a few hours away from reality and immerses us in an escapist Hollywood blockbuster, all while gifting us the brilliant performance of Denzel Washington. Ridley Scott may be pushing 90, but like a Roman emperor offering bread and circuses, he still knows how to entertain the masses with gory spectacle. So let's just sit back, relax, and enjoy.